podcast. If you haven't heard it, it's a gem. Every single one of the episodes is truly spectacular. Today, we are listening to his talk for a while. That is a little bit more, we don't know exactly how much time, but it will be the first part. Chaos, Climate, and Creation is the title of this conversation. And then we will go into conversation and open dialogue after the listening. That is the most exciting part of this. So, yes, without further ado, Michael, over to you. We are truly happy to be here and we have our full attention with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to be with everyone and welcome. So I thought I'd start out with a couple of ideas and then I want to tell a story. And maybe the first idea is that we live in a very unusual time, particularly in the sense that nature is rattling at the same time that human culture is unraveling. And so we're in this dual collapse going on. And the two, of course, have always been interconnected, but now some of the disconnection and some of the harmful interconnection has brought us to the point where some of aspects of human culture are seriously damaging elements of nature. And so that's the background for almost everything. And people can have different opinions about it, but in a sense, the human soul feels what's going on in the world. One of the old ideas is that the individual soul is secretly connected to the soul of the world. And we could say at this time, the soul of the world is in pain. And because of this kind of divisions that are happening throughout culture, but also because of the kind of separation or dissociation from nature. Traditionally, human nature is connected to great nature, and nature is the teacher for many traditional cultures. So that's one idea. The other idea has to do with time, and that is to say that we find ourselves at a point which we could describe as the end of an era. It's not just a turning point in time, it's also a collapsing point in time. And of course, the ancient Greeks had more than one word for time. A key word was chronos, from which we get chronological time, clock time, calendrical time. So in a sense, that kind of time, which is limited and essentially time bound, stands at odds with what they used to call kairos, K-A-I-R-O-S, kairos time, which is timelessness, the break in time, the opening of time. And so a kairos time could be when a moment becomes momentous. What could have been just another moment passing by in the march of time cracks open. And instead of simply having the diminishing sense of time running out, the eternal rushes into the world through the crack in time. And at that moment, which would be called the opportune moment, everything can change. And that, of course, can happen to a person individually, and it does happen within most people's lives more than once. But under circumstances like the current circumstances, that can happen collectively. There can be a crack in time through which the eternal is one way to describe it, the mythic, the inspired rushes in and helps change the world. And so one of the things to be aware of, I think, in times like this, which we could also call dark times like this, is the potential and the possibility for the opportune moment. And the thing about opportunity, it's a moment that appears and then it disappears. And so if we are not anticipating this idea of a radical change, the ancient Greeks called it a changing of the gods, as if the background energies of life shift. You could also call it a shift of the archetypes. If we're not anticipating that, if we don't include that into our kind of imagination of what might happen, then we will miss it. If we miss it, it doesn't mean that the world ends. Mythologically speaking, the world can't end. You get to the end and it turns out that you find a new beginning. But what will happen if we're not attuned to the possibility of radical change that is healing and recreative, then it will prolong the sense of being in the dark times. So those are the two ideas I want to just place. And then I want to go to a story. You could call it a folk tale. I call it a folk myth. And the reason I call it that is it's coming from the tradition of folk, but it has mythological elements in it. And another thing about time is over time, all great civilizations collapse. The amazing civilizations in ancient Egypt broke all the way back down to be piles of sand. That happens to great civilizations, but what happens is the stories that are carried by the folk, the stories that are carried in the hearts of people, have to do with surviving those things. And so folk tales, or I call some of them folk myths, often are holding the information that the great civilizations have lost. And so I love folk myths. This is a folk myth from what we now call North America. It's from a number of native tribes in what we call North America. And so it was a story that was held by different tribes. And so there's no single version of it. And so this is the version of it I'm telling in the moment. And unlike a lot of folk tales or fairy tales, it doesn't begin with once upon a time. It actually begins by saying, in this time now, and right nearby where we are, there is a cave. And inside that cave is all of the knowledge that we most need. And yet somehow, despite people going back and forth 24 hours a day on all kinds of roads and back roads, highways and byways, most people fail to find that cave that is holding the knowledge that we most need and that many are looking for. If we did find the cave, when we looked inside, what we would see was an old woman sitting on the floor of the cave, and she's weaving. And what she's weaving is the most beautiful garment that anyone has ever seen. And she's been working at it for a long time. And in order to make it especially beautiful, she is carefully making the hem of this garment out of porcupine quills. And in order to be able to weave the porcupine quills into the hem of the garment, she has to bite down and flatten them. And she's been biting down on porcupine quills for so long that she has worn her teeth down to nothing but nubs coming out of the gums. But still she continues weaving. And as she weaves this beautiful garment, every once in a while she has to stop weaving. She has to get up and go to the back of the cave. And at the back of the cave, there is burning what some people say the fire that is the most ancient thing in the entire world. And hanging over this ancient fire at the back of the cave, there is a cauldron. And in the cauldron, there is a stew that includes all the seeds of all the grains and all the flowers and all the fruits and all the plants and all the trees that can grow on earth. And if she doesn't go back and stir the stew of seeds, then the seeds will burn and there won't be any grains or flowers or fruits or plants or trees. And so the old woman, already weary from all of her weaving work, gets up and being old and tired, she moves slowly towards the back of the cave. And as the old woman is moving towards the back of the cave, the black dog, what black dog? The black dog gets up and goes over where she has laid on the floor of the cave the beautiful garment that she's been weaving for oh so many years. And the black dog, seeing a loose thread, grabs that thread and begins to pull. And the dog doesn't stop pulling on the thread until it has unraveled the entire beautiful garment that the old woman has been weaving for so long. After that, the old woman comes back from stirring the stew of the seeds, and she sees on the floor of the cave right before her, her beautiful garment now unraveled and laying on the floor in chaos. And for a moment, she's just stunned, standing there. And then she sits down, and looking at the unraveled threads on the floor, she herself locks in on a certain thread. And then she picks it up. And as soon as she picks up the loose thread on the floor, she gets a new vision of an even more beautiful garment. And she begins weaving again, this time certain that she's weaving the most beautiful garment anyone has ever seen or even imagined. That's basically the story. And the story is typically told by the elders in the tribe, and they tell it when it seems that everything is falling apart. In other words, the elders tell everyone else, here's how to understand this world, especially here's how to see and find your place in it when everything is falling apart around you. And inevitably someone says, well, damn the black dog. If it wasn't for the black dog, the woman would have finished the garment and it would have been the most beautiful thing anyone had ever seen. At which point the elders remind everyone that that old woman is the old woman of the world. That old woman is weaving the world, which in a sense for people here on earth is the most beautiful garment, the most beautiful nest, the most beautiful womb anyone has ever seen. And so that if she ever finishes it, that's the end of the world. As a matter of fact, it's helpful to know that the word perfect actually means through the form. And when you're through the form, it's over. So that perfection is actually closer to death than it is to beauty. So that's the message that comes from the elders to everyone else in the tribal group. And of course, it's the message coming from this old story that has been passed around and passed down through the ages to remind us of what the nature of the world is. And obviously, the inspiration and the intention is to show that the world is this place that is carefully woven into beauty, but also a place where everything falls apart. And even though it's a simple folk tale, you can find in it many great themes of mythology. For instance, in ancient India, where there are so many myths of creation and destruction, they say that the world is made of three things. That is to say, the energy of creation, often symbolized by the god Vishnu, who dreams up the world, but also then the god Brahma, who sustains the world by keeping everything going, which the old woman does when she goes to the back of the cave and stirs the stew of seeds. But also the third energy in ancient myths of India would be, it could be Kali, who unravels things, or it could be Shiva. There's a third entity. Shiva is a good choice because he's a dark god. He's blue, not black like the dog, but he's black-blue. And that's the destructive unraveling force. And so a summary of the great myths of ancient India could be that the world is brought to being by a vision that comes from a dream, is sustained by a god or a combination of gods and goddesses that keep everything going, in meaningful ways. But then it inevitably, in a dark time, by a dark thread or a dark move, something happens to unravel the whole thing. But then, if we stay present and if we pay attention in certain ways, we then get to see the recreation, the reimagining, the reweaving of the whole thing. So that's in this little story, in the way that folk myths carry big, big ideas in small ways. And it's found in many cultures throughout the world, this idea of a vision of creation, a recreation of life, and then a collapse of everything that was created, only to have it all be recreated again. In modern world, people are obsessed with history, and history begins with some sense of time, and history ends at the end of time. But when we get to the realm of mythology, the end is actually a beginning. As a matter of fact, the word end, in terms of etymology, the word end doesn't mean final collapse. The word end means loose thread. So we are in the loose thread times. We are in the unraveling times. But that also places us close to the reimagining times and the recreative times. And so often when I'm working with this story, I'm suggesting to people, imagine that we are the old woman and that we are standing and seeing it all coming apart or all laying unraveled before us the way most human cultures now are unraveled and institutions are being hollowed out and the things that used to protect people are now not protecting anyone. Not only that, everyone is turning against each other with polarization, which is another kind of unraveling. And we really are the witnesses of all of that. But if we take the guidance of the story and we look for a loose thread ourselves, then we are invited to pick up the thread and help reweave the whole thing and make that old garment the new shape of the world, because that's the nature of the world. That is to say, that it is created, it exists in a certain form for a certain time, and then it unravels or collapses only to renew again. I was mentioning earlier how human nature is secretly connected to great nature, and the mystery of nature, people talk about the mystery of life. The core mystery, near as I can tell, is birth, death, rebirth, or birth, death, and reimagination or renewal. And so we are in the dark times. The dark black dog is an indicator of the dark times. But we are also in the times when everything might change in a moment, as in the idea of kairos. And so to me, to be human, to be alive at this time, I think we are called to be witnesses of the collapse, but we are also called to be agents of the recreation. And just in terms, because I know a lot of people are storytellers, just on the level of stories and mythology, creation stories, near as I can tell, are actually recreation stories. All of the creation stories, and of course there's creation stories in every culture that has ever existed. The smallest tribes along the Amazon River have their own cosmology and their own mythology. Humans are the only mythologists and the only cosmologists. We are the people telling the story. Cosmology is the story of how it all came to be. But creation myths are actually not simply telling how it came to be. They're telling how it came to be and how it can come to be again. Creation stories are best understood as recreation stories, and that's particularly important now. When we imagine that most of the world, especially the Western world, is caught in the trap of time, caught in the narrow understanding that time marches on and waits for no one, and then time wears down like the sands dropping down through one of those old time devices. Whereas mythology says that time is connected to timelessness, that all of time has to come from somewhere, and it comes from eternity, which is endless, and therefore everything in this world can be renewed by a touch or a breath or an inspiration from the eternal. And so, in that sense, we're living in the dark times. We're living in the hard times. We're living in the times when people radically turn against each other. We're living in the times when people forget what it is to be human. Because to be truly human, according to all the old stories, would to be standing in the middle with our heads touching heaven and our feet going into the deep goat's earth, as they used to call it. Humans are betwixt and between beings. We are part animal and part divine. We are anchored to the earth, but our imagination soars into the galaxies. And when times get dark and when times get polarized and when everything seems to be turning against each other, one of the things that we can do and are really being called to do is to crack open the spell of time, to crack open the limits of history in order to re-engage with the inspiration and the breath of mystery, and to find ourselves again as vessels, as potential vessels of the divine, or vessels through which the divine or eternal energy can enter the world. That's always been the job of the storyteller. It's been the job of the poets and the job of the singers, the musicians, and the healers. And it's only the modern world where all those things get separated and divided from each other as if they were threads that never touched each other. Because in all of the old cultures, the threads of artistic creation, and the threads of healing, and the threads of invention were always woven together. And each person is kind of a unique presentation of a reweaving of the threads that have been used to weave individuals, but also animals and plants and the whole singing thing. So we live in the hardest times in some regard, with everybody with greater anxieties and fears of what might happen. But those turn out to also be the times of radical change. And those of us that are interested in imagination and stories, that are interested in psyche, psychology, and healing, and that are interested in the arts and the ways that humans can participate in the ongoing creation of the world, those of us that are inclined like that, I feel, are being called to be not just witnesses to the collapse, but also agents of the recreation. So maybe I'll stop there and see if there are questions or comments, because the notion of weaving includes exchanging ideas and energies through language.
Wow. Thank you, Michael. That's a lot of hearts out there. Um, and yes, the notion of weaving implies that we are together in the weaving, in the act of creation. So let's open up the dialogue for anyone who would like to go. You can either just open your mic and comment or ask questions, or you can also raise your hand using the Zoom button to raise hands. And I can see Monica is already lined up. Why don't we adopt a rhythm for this dialogue? And I propose that we have more or less 2, 3 interventions, and then we drum back to Michael, and so on. Is that all right with you, Michael?
Yeah, although I like going right back and forth with the question, especially, but
Okay.
also a comment, because one thing
Okay.
provokes something else in someone else's mind,
Perfect.
and we
Let's flow
weave.
in the weaving.
Yes.
Monica, over to you.
Thanks so much, Michael. That was very interesting, and there's so many things that resonated for me. Like what you said about perfection being closer to death than beauty. That was quite interesting. And I don't have a question as much as just a comment. Kind of relating back to the discussion that we had in this space a week ago about the myth of time, and how this like weaving of new worlds, as you were describing, as kind of jumping out of that imaginary, that time is somehow fixed and is somehow going in this one direction, and it has some set boundaries, how we can reimagine and think about time as a myth and not as a material reality. I think that's quite interesting, but I don't know how to enact it in kind of everyday life. I feel some maybe kind of societal boundaries around time. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts about that. Thank you again.
As
Several
we go
thoughts.
back to Michael,
Yeah.
I'm going to kindly ask you, if you can, with full camera compassion, to share your image, because as we are in a dialogue, it's very beautiful to be able to see each other a little bit. Sorry for the interruption. Over to you, Michael.
Okay. So just several threads to pick up. One, to expand a little bit upon the danger of perfectionism. I know people get raised to think they should be perfect, but honestly, the word perfect comes from the Latin, which means to go through the form. So when it's perfect, it's really dying. And none of us are perfect. As a matter of fact, our imperfections are part of what makes us unique. And so the whole pursuit of perfection is a digression or a dissociation from what is really trying to awaken inside us, which is a unique, the old idea is that each soul born is unique. So each person is not here to become something. Like when I work with young people, one of the first things I tell them is, listen, the idea that you've heard that you must become someone is an incorrect idea. You already are someone. There is inside each person an essence. I like to call it genius because that's an old Latin word also, but it doesn't mean high IQ or specific talent. Genius, the original meaning of it, is the spirit that's already there. And so each person has in them a spirit that's already there when they come into the world. And the purpose of growing up, and you could say the true aim of education, is to awaken that innate spirit. The word education, another Latin word, means to bring it out. And the it is the spirit that's already in there. So a genuine teacher will first try to recognize the spirit of the student and then help bring out their life spirit. The second big word in education is, what do you call it? I'm losing it already. Instruction. Instruction is a Latin word which means to pack it in. Most modern education is packing stuff into young people before we find out what their spirit is that we want to bring out. So sometimes you have to not just leave the family, but you have to leave the mainstream of life in order to have experiences that help bring out the spirit that's already there. And that becomes important because the way that we reweave the world is by becoming more conscious of our own spiritual presence. And then we use that which is unique in us to give us a thread to help reweave the things of the world that have fallen apart. And the other thing, just to add to the conversation about time and timelessness, we're all born into the time and space world. But the old notion that you find in almost all cultures is before we came into the world, our soul existed, and it exists in connection to a unique spirit. And that's what's bringing us into the world. But when we go from the unseen world, from the other world, from the divine, from the eternal into the time-bound world, we forget who we are inside and what we're bringing. And then we're born into a family who cannot see our actual spirit. They can in some ways, but it's not the job of the family to see the spirit or the purpose or the aim or the meaning of their children's lives. The job of the family is to love and protect, to nourish and support the life of the child. And inevitably, we all leave home because we can't get everything we want there. And we go out in the world, and then that begins the adventure of trying to awaken to who we already are inside. Because when that happens, we then get hints and insights into what it is we're supposed to bring to the world. And just following the story of the old woman weaving, it's not going to be some new idea that saves us all and changes the world. It's not going to be some ideology or belief system. It's going to be the awakening of individual souls to the nature of their own inner genius. And the more that that happens, people automatically start picking up the right threads. And no one person has to do it. I'm arguing against the idea of the hero's journey. It's a great myth. I love the hero's journey myths. But when Joseph Campbell said it was a monomyth, that was a mythological mistake. Myths are multi-visionary, multicultural. They're diverse, just the way a forest is diverse. There is no one story. There's the many, many threads of living story that we each represent and that the trees represent and the animals represent. And the idea that there would be some heroic monomyth is a very common mistake in terms of the Western world with this obsession on history and so on. And in order to be into the next world, we have to let that go. Not that we can't have a heroic moments and certain people can be more heroic than others, but that everyone has something to bring to the reweaving, because everyone enters the world with inner gifts and capacities that are waiting to awaken, and the troubles in our lives are not there to defeat us as much as they are there to force us, push us into finding the deeper parts of ourselves, which have, by definition, gifts and aims and purpose.
Thank you, Michael. We have I think, a connected question to that last second half of your answer or of your comment that comes from Carolina. It's on the chat. Thank you, Carolina, also for being visible. Would you like to ask your question out loud, or would you like me to read it? I'll read it. Okay. So the question is, what practical things do you do to start your day when you wake up with an empty hole in your stomach without any kind of hope for the world or for your own life?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the honesty of that. That's a condition we all find ourselves in again and again because of all the trauma in the world, all the tragedy in the world, all the callousness in the world. So fortunately for me, quite a long time ago, someone told me that you could write your dreams down. And if you did that, you might find information that was helpful. It struck me as a really good idea. So that is now, God, that's 50 years ago. I every morning get up and I usually have a thread of dreams, if not a whole dream. I have something dream-like. So the first thing I do, honestly, is I make tea. It's like the morning ritual. I make tea, then I take the tea and I go right away and I begin writing. And typically I'm writing down a dream. And my assumption is that the dream world is giving me knowledge that's meaningful, specifically to me usually, that I wouldn't find otherwise. And so, and of course, dreams are really stories coming from the unseen, and they're full of codes and symbols. And so I couldn't be happier in a way to be in the morning, even if I'm feeling defeated or discouraged. I am doing it through this dream work, which has this strange quality of giving the sense that this is all going to continue somehow. And a little story about that. So what I like to do is study, I study psychology, mythology, anthropology. I study everything really. But then I turn it into a story because then it travels with me. And so I was really excited to find in studying some of the tribes along the Amazon River that these relatively small tribes, often less than 200 people, not only have their own cosmology, they have these profound ideas. And one of them is that when we go to sleep at night, well, first of all, they imagine that we have more than one soul. That's an idea you find also around the world. And so you have the body soul, which is the thing that's keeping our body moving alive and having desires and all that stuff. But when we go to sleep, the body soul goes to sleep. And that releases the dream soul. This is how they describe it. And the dream soul goes right to the center of the cosmos. And in the center of the cosmos, there's this distribution operation which gives dreams. And so the soul then comes back from the center of the cosmos. And when we wake up with the dream, it's a message from the center of the cosmos. I just love that. I mean, that made my day for 10 years, every day for 10 years. And it made me really commit to dream work. But then someone says, well, wait a minute. If the messages are coming from the center of the cosmos, why aren't they very clear? Dream messages aren't clear. And so there's two things about that. Dream messages, like stories and myths, are symbolic. And they invite us into the symbolic life. And when we take it seriously, now we have a part of our life, our inner life, that is symbolic, which is a much bigger thing than being logical. It's bigger, as far as I can tell. But not only that, the message coming from the center of the cosmos has to somehow be wrapped in terms that we can understand. Not that it isn't puzzling, but that we could puzzle it out. So for instance, I have a dream of a girl that I went to school with in 3rd grade that I haven't seen since 3rd grade. What is she doing in my dream? And could that be connected to the cosmos? Well, there was something unique in that connection that we had, even if it was momentary, and the cosmos is pushing it through that memory so that I could get something from the dream, so that when I drank my rest of my tea and I was ready to face today, I might still have fears of the emptiness of things. I still might have doubts, but I also now had some symbols and some threads of imagination that keep me connected to things that do not simply end. The cosmos is transforming all the time, and we are living in moments that are just as much transformational as they are disturbing.
It's almost as if we had been, because we have in the center of the cosmos, we have been conjuring this conversation. Hence, we will be inviting everyone in Weaving Pluriverse to do dream work. And that's a gift prepared for you coming up in the cloud forest. But as we get there, are there any other questions or comments that would like to be woven here into this woven, yeah, beautiful woven fabric today?
Can I offer a little reflection? Well, thank you. This is incredibly inspiring, just beautiful. And I think that something that I'd love to hear more about is there's just such in the story that you shared, in the first story, when there's no blame, the dog isn't berated or blamed, there's no circle, there's no confusion, there's no distraction. And that wisdom is something that I'd like to hear more about, because I want to like bathe in it. So I'd love to hear more about your feelings or your reflections about how that wisdom, it gets really embodied, that's so detached from, these spirals that can happen.
So there was some breaking up, and I'm not totally clear on the question.
Okay. I live in the country, so maybe, yeah, sorry about that.
No,
Can you hear me now?
yes.
Okay. My question is really about like this beautiful part of the story about that there was no blame with the dog that, started the unraveling. And there was some sort of very graceful way of just the wisdom of that woman becoming again the weaver and really enjoying the opportunity to go into another level of her creativity. And I thought that was really beautiful. And I'd like to know more about that part of the wisdom because I think well, just because I would like to learn more about that part of the wisdom.
Okay, thank you. I get it. Yeah, so the story it opens with this, wonder of someone weaving the most beautiful garment. And that's all about creativity. That's what we call creativity for humans. So in that sense, it's a creation story, but notice that it starts again after the unraveling, you have another creation. So it's a classic recreation story. And that's why I think it suits the times that we're in very well. So you could say that if we just stayed in the first part of the story and we all became devotees of the old woman who weaves the world, we decided we were going to do that. And we were going to get her wisdom. And her wisdom is, if you wanted to think in mythological terms, it'd be like Sophia. the old goddess in ancient Greece, who was a creator god and brought the world into existence. And Sophia is really the Greek word for wisdom. Philosophia, philo means study, Sophia means wisdom. Philosophy at its essence is the study of wisdom. So I'm hearing what you say as part of being in the realm of Sophia, which we can also see as the old woman weaving the world. So everyone is supposed to have some experience of how their unique life is intended to be living, bringing us into a world of meaning, beauty, purpose. And so that's also that first part of things, where everything does seem kind of magical, and we are being touched by the energies that make things. I mean, humans are makers, and we're supposed to be making things, but I'm not sure that those things are supposed to be primarily technological. I think the things we're supposed to be making are things of beauty, things of coherence, and so on. And so the beginning of the story would be learning about that. If, for instance, you could say in that sphere, a person learns what they are bringing to the world. So another old idea that I like, and maybe I already said this, but I'll repeat, each person comes into the world gifted and aimed. The more modern theory is each soul is empty. Tabula rasa, that's the Latin term, an empty slate. But throughout history and throughout the times before history, all different human groups had the sense that each child comes into the world gifted and aimed. And so that first part of the cave story is with the old woman in her gift, in her instinctive aim to weave beauty. And each person has some of that somehow. I'm suggesting it's also unique to the person. So there are many people who play guitar, and some are more gifted than others, you could say. But often when we find someone who plays well, we can recognize their playing in the first several notes because there's something unique about it. So the issue isn't to compete with other people or to see who's the best. The issue is to find the unique way we are intended to bring our gifts into the world. I would say that's the wisdom of the first part of the story. Then what happens is, if we're fortunate enough to have that experience and learn about that and know something about it, then it becomes time to learn something about the other side of life, where everything falls apart. And that's, in this case, it's the black dog. Now, some people will say, well, why is it black? Again, I'll go back to ancient Greece. One of the ancient Greek words for wisdom means dark knowledge. There's knowledge of beauty and light. There's knowledge of how it all can come together. There's not knowledge of the many, many ways to add to the ongoing creation of the world. And then there's the darker knowledge, the dark knowledge, the other side of wisdom. A word that's become very popular throughout the world that comes from ancient India is guru. And guru has two parts, gu and ru. And if I remember correctly, gu means light without darkness, and ru means darkness without light. And a guru is someone who can bring the darkness and the light together, and that's interpreted as wisdom. To be really knowledgeable, to be really alive, we have to understand our own connection to both beauty and light and to darkness and shadow. We live in a world where each day is the dawning of a new light, but eventually the end of the day comes and the whole world goes back into darkness. Well, it doesn't anymore because of incandescent lights, but that's because everybody's hiding from the darkness. In ancient cultures, the idea was at the end of the day, the world goes back into eternity. And so darkness is its own teacher. And to be wise, we have to know both the light and the dark. And unfortunately, maybe, the dark knowledge comes hard. But we can be cruising along doing really well and then we get pulled down or we fall down. And so one of the names for that is the dark night of the soul. In the dark night of the soul, we enter darkness, and if we accept what has pulled us down, if we accept it, then we find what used to be called the light inside the dark. One of the old names for the human soul is the light hidden inside the dark. What we're looking for, we're not necessarily going to find in the light. If everything that was missing could be found in the light, they'd already found it. But in fact, we live in a world where so many essential things are missing that we have to realize that genuine wisdom says to find that which is missing, we have to go into the dark. And that's true for the individual person. It's true also for the collective of humanity. The dark times, in the dark times, I think it's Hafez who says, let the dark times season you. The appearance of the black dog is inevitable. If we were all, in a auditorium together, I'll often ask the audience, how many people have had their lives fall apart or unravel? And all the hands go up, and some people are waving 2 hands and wishing they had 4. And then a few people are not putting their hands up. Those few are in denial. Everybody's life falls apart. And what we often don't realize is how we pulled it back together. You look back over your life, it's happened time and again. Marriages fall apart, families fall apart, your health falls apart, you lose loved ones, and that's like a falling apart. And we survive those things. And if we can figure out how we survived this, what part of ourselves was able to manage in that darkness, we're closer to our own genius and we're closer to our own wisdom.
Thank you,
Hello,
Michael.
can I make a question?
Yes,
A comment?
go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Michael. Thank you for this conversation. I was making some relations between the black dog and this figure, the trickster, that is also mentioned in a lot of myths. And I'm thinking also how sometimes we become that black dog as societies, as agents of chaos to change what is order with what is under control. I think this figure of the trickster comes and change things to create new beginnings. And I just felt like sometimes we don't see ourselves as the black dog, and I think it has its place also in this whole idea that you were mentioning of the dark and the light. I think I just wanted to see if you have something to say about this figure, trickster.
Thank you. No, I agree completely. Trickster is an archetypal figure, and the black dog is acting as that archetypal energy that takes everything apart. And some people have that trickster energy in them. I think an important thing about the trickster, 2 things I would say. One is the clown. I'll go to the other, a related image, which is the clown. And there's this famous thing called the tears of the clown. So the clown makes everyone laugh, but inside the clown is crying. And that shows you the darkness. That if a person is a trickster or going to get involved in trickster energy, they are going to be touching the darker parts of the world and themselves. And so if I go to, we're in a Native American story, so to speak, because that's the one I told. And if you go into Native American traditions, you would have certain people in the tribe that are going to be the tricksters, that are going to act out the knowledge that comes from darkness, the things that people aren't seeing, but also that are going to trick people into falling or slipping or dropping something when they're being pretentious or when they're in their own false certainty of how great they are. And so, so the trickster becomes a really important figure. Ultimately, I think the trickster is actually a healer. That the trickster, because if a person takes on the role of trickster, and they don't get the darker wisdom of it, then they can do harm to themselves and others. But when they realize that the point of the trick is to trick everybody into waking up, and in not just waking up in a simple way, but waking up to the things that are missing in that person, in that family, in that community. And so the real goal, in a sense, of the trickster is to trick everybody back into a greater sense of consciousness, which means that the tricksters have to have that guru quality of knowing light and dark. And so, yes, really important. I would also say it's important for people who know that they have a lot of trickster energy to connect with other people who know about it. And here I'm thinking of young people and even children where you have someone who's contrary. Because one of the ways to understand the trickster is they go contrary to everyone else. I'm thinking of this tribe along the Amazon River, actually, another one, where they're on the occasion of their New Year's gathering, the people all go down to the river and everyone goes in and washes like a baptism. And but the tricksters start out in the water and they come out and cover themselves with mud. They do the opposite of what everybody's doing in order to show everybody what they're not seeing. And then the next phase is people begin to throw mud at each other, where the idea is you throw mud at anybody who's bothered or irritated you. Well, imagine it's a small community, they all irritate each other. Pretty soon everybody's throwing mud, everybody's covered with mud, and now they go back into water and wash off the mud. And now they have actually done the baptism. So in other words, it had to go into the mud before it could get cleansed. So tricksters, in order to not trick themselves, I'll just go this one other avenue here because you had mentioned chaos. Anyone who thinks they're using chaos is about to be tricked, because chaos is the big trick. Chaos, the world is made out of chaos and cosmos, out of chaos and creation. And so when someone, like, I live in the United States, in the United States, and now we have someone, let's say, pretending to be president, Donald Trump. He's become rather well known. He called himself the chaos president. So what he does is he uses chaos to confuse people, tricks people into thinking he's powerful. They vote for him, and then he takes all the power and all the money to himself. However, he ultimately will trick himself into his own demise. You cannot direct or channel or harness chaos. It's bigger than any of us. And that's why the trickster eventually learns about his or her own shadow. And that's when the trickster becomes a genuine healer, because the tricks that they use are the things that help awaken other people. Those are some thoughts. Thank you for bringing in the trickster.
Thank you. Excellent, excellent point and that I want to continue weaving with Susan's question. Susan, would you like me to read your question, or would you like to read it or say it?
Well, I can say I've been traveling. I apologize for moving backgrounds, but wow, I'm just so full of gratitude. So many rich nourishments. I'm going to have to digest this meal today. But I think one of the things that I really appreciated was the idea that your parents may not appreciate your genius. And it wasn't that mine weren't supportive, but that the family may not be the presumed unit that's going to give you everything you need, and the workplace and the neighborhoods. So these social conventions, I in California, U.S. creature, but social presumptions about where we're going to get fed and find our co-conspirators, our co-weavers. I'm very acoustic, so I might say, who will I be playing jazz music with? You know, something emerges. I don't have a defined product, but I'd love your thoughts on, it's like a serial approach to here's a group of fellow musicians and then another and another, and my instrument keeps getting seasoned, but at least the way my instrument works, I'm not supposed to be a soloist. I'm not supposed to be a lone composer. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts about that.
Thank you. And thank you for the good metaphors. We each have our own instrument. It's our own spirit, really. And it's our own soulfulness. And I think you mentioned the jazz band, and I love the idea of that. Because in the jazz band, everyone has to take a solo. And the rest of the time, everyone has to support the general complexities of the tune and the rhythm of the tune. And in a way, in a jazz band, if you play jazz, you can join almost any jazz band because you can, the things and you can fit in. And so then you have these, instead of having a distinct career path, you have these occasions of fitting in with a band. And I think that's where we live now. I call it sudden community. It's very hard to build a continuous community now because of the disturbances in both nature and culture. So then how do we get what they used to call blessings, confirmation from others, but also blessings from others? And I think we get it by winding up in the right band every once in a while, or forming temporary communities, which can be mutually inspiring to everyone involved, but then it disbands because everything now is being quickly unraveled. As soon as you make something, it unravels. That's what's happening with music, but it's happening with everything. So I think, yes, everyone has their instrument. It is very common for the parents to have an adverse reaction to the genius of the child. And I want to make more clear what I mean by genius. Nowadays, we talk about the child as being the result of the DNA of the parents. And there's clearly some truth in that, and there's interesting studies about it, but it is a very narrow band. Our mother was dreaming while we were in the womb. We are the child of her dreams as well as her DNA. But maybe more importantly than that, I'll go to this old Irish idea, which says that when a child is born, it's born from three sources. One is the coming together of two humans that are going to be the parents, the DNA profile. The second one is an ancestor trying to come back to life. That's kind of charming. That something in us is connected to the ancestral world. And even though we're newborn, we're also ancient. That's valuable. And then the third thing that's coming in is something that has never existed before, a new spirit coming to life. So that's how I like to think of the child. And so that means that we are children of three worlds right away. We're children of our parents, we can't deny that, but we're children connected somehow specifically to some ancient energy, force, spirit, whatever. And then we are a unique spirit being born in the moment, to the moment, for the moment. And that gives the sense of why we might want to be in a jazz band, because we can fit in, because we can learn the notes and the rhythms and the score. And then every once in a while, we have to erupt with our own musical sound. There's an old idea that in classical music, which is very scripted, and everybody has their sheet, their music sheets. But in the origins of classical music, in the middle of the score, there would be improvisation. In other words, classical music used to be jazz. And this idea of jazz is really meaningful because it has the reweaving in it, that you play a tune, but you might play it differently the next time, and especially the solo parts. And so right now it's important to, I think, see ourselves as more as jazz musicians. And so I guess I want to emphasize the idea that each person born is unique. And that uniqueness, I'll pull a thread. I'll pull a long thread. People get the ideas. This would be in the first part of the cave story, in the beautiful weaving that the old woman is doing, where she's almost finished the garment, which is actually the world, the whole cosmos. And there's a way in which we can feel connected to the whole cosmos. And in a sense, we usually get some momentary connection to that early in life. Something beautiful happens and we feel we're part of the whole thing. And then we lose that usually. Mysticism is partly the study of the ways to reconnect to the whole cosmos. But here's a kind of open secret. The way to connect to the whole universal, beautiful, wonderful, living cosmological thing is not to let go of being oneself, but it's rather to take the thread of uniqueness, and that is what connects us to the cosmos. I'm turning around the idea that if we just would let go of our ego, then we could disappear or kind of immerse into the cosmos, when really the idea is when we become a more precise version of who we are intended to be, then we are connected to the thread. You could call it the genius thread, the destiny thread, whatever you want to call it, to a thread that ties us to the great big ongoing weaving of the cosmos. The uniqueness of the soul is the thing most forgotten in the modern world and most important to humanity. I just say things, by the way, as if they were true. You don't have to believe them. You know what I mean? I mean, my job is to, like a storyteller, you tell a story, and you can agree, disagree. I see people are sending hearts, but you can send, fingers, whatever. Anyway, you know what I'm saying? I get carried away, but I feel like that's the job. Lay it out, and then each person has to figure out what it means for them, how it works for them. Like when I work with stories, if the group isn't too big, I'll have everybody take a place in the story, and we become the story. And then we talk to each other from the places in the story. Imagine if they did that we did that with political situations now, where people can't say, you're not in my story. No, we're all in the same story. So anyway, I say things forcefully. It's up to you to figure out what's true and what's not.
Hi, hello. Thank you, Michael. This has been so beautiful. I was wondering if you could just speak more about weaving. I mean, just weaving as a metaphor, because it's so widespread and it's so material at the same time and so tangible, but at the same time, it's so open to mean so many things. So I'm just wondering, like, what have you learned about weaving through the interpretation of stories?
Thank you. A really good question. I didn't say it earlier, but it is evident in the story that the weaver is the old woman. She's the old woman of the world. So at the very beginning, I mentioned kairos, the opportune moment. And the two images from ancient Greece about the kairos moment, the moment when time breaks and anything is possible, the opportune moment. The two images are the shooting of an arrow towards a target. And at that point, the idea is that you pull back and there's this tremendous tension in the bow. And then at just the right moment, you let the arrow go and it hits the center of the target. That's one image of kairos. The other image is having a shuttle in your hand and moving the shuttle between the warp and the weft on the loom. And then those were considered to be the masculine understanding of the opportune moment and the feminine understanding of the opportune moment. So weaving typically is a feminine art. I don't mean that men can't do it and don't do it. Anybody can be attracted to it. It is archetypal. It is totally compelling when you're doing it. But it has a feminine quality of the way you would weave a nest, or the way you weave a garment. And anything that covers a person is considered to have a more feminine quality. And I know there's confusion about masculine and feminine, all that kind of stuff. But to give it its due, weaving was a feminine art. It doesn't mean that only women can do it. It just means that it has that quality of connecting threads, of making things out of disparate energies, and so on. And so I tell that story specifically, or one of the reasons I tell it is because we're not going to get a better world by using the same principles and ideas that we used to make the world that's now falling apart. There has to be a return of the feminine. And I'm not saying that's the same as a woman. I'm saying it can come through a man or a person who is both feminine and masculine or whatever you want. It's the idea of Sophia, wisdom in its feminine form. And so if we can agree that the world is falling apart and that, as in the story, we're waiting for the opportunity to reweave a better world. Therefore, you could say, if you look at the qualities that are missing in the world that's falling apart, those become key qualities for reweaving the next world. And so, first of all, that would involve inclusion. When you're weaving, you can weave at anything. And so you don't throw anyone out because they don't look right or they don't fit. Weaving would be in using all the qualities of human life to make the next world. But also it would be bringing back into the world a greater understanding of the meaning and the value of femininity, which automatically would benefit the earth. When we look back at history of the Western world, the modern world, you see not just an exploitation of the earth, but a kind of negation of the earth. The modern tech bros, they call them the tech bros, the multi-billionaires running the new technological operations, they're wanting to go to other planets. They don't value the planet that we actually come from. And so the loss of the meaning and the purpose and the wisdom of the feminine has led to a great devaluation of women and a devaluation of the earth itself. And so weaving in that consideration would be relearning that the world is not just made from inspiration, but it's also made from touch and feeling and taking threads of any kind and finding out how they are interconnected. And so that's one way that I see the weaving, and one reason I tell weaving stories. But here's another thing, another layer. To be a storyteller, you have to be a weaver. We're weaving words all the time. I've been doing it standing here for quite a while now. Nothing is prefabricated or prefigured. The words come and you just pick certain ones and you weave them together. And what you weave together on one occasion, you would weave differently on another. So that weaving is also being true to the moment. And so if we're going to have a better world, it's going to have to be more interconnected between species, between layers of existence, and I think of between aspects of the cosmos. And weaving is one of the greatest imaginations for that. I'm thinking, I keep getting images. I'm getting one having to do, again, we're in a Native American story, so I'm having this image of Native American moccasins. So there's a style amongst many tribes in North America, but exists in other parts of the world, where the footgear was woven. Often it would have leather on the bottom, but then it would have other things woven. And in certain tribes, they use beads and beadwork, which is another kind of weaving. And on the moccasins would be woven images like of the cosmos or of a certain bird or some symbolic thing, but it would be reversed on the top of the moccasin, the shoe in a sense, so that the person wearing them would look down and see a woven image looking back at them. It wouldn't be woven so that the neighbors could see it or the people in the fashion show could see it. It'd be woven so that when a person took a step, they could look down and see this symbolic connection that they had to the world on their own feet. That just came to mind because we're talking about weaving. And I'll go back to something we talked about earlier about dreams. That in order to do dream work in a meaningful and consistent way, we have to learn about how symbols are woven and rewoven in order to reveal things and deliver ideas, inspirations, and forms of imagination. And so weaving is an archetypal energy that is enormous and that is often given a feminine tone. That's some thoughts.
As I pass it on to Caro, I'm just going to note the threads that become apparent between the weaving that many of you were up to with the conversation, the creation lab with Adi, who just asked the question, that was all around lineage and weaving lineage, and now the weaving. And the fact that we are going to be inviting you to dreaming, it's all so interwoven. Caro, over to you.
Thank you, Isa, and thank you, Michael, for this beautiful talk. Very inspiring. You said at the beginning that we are called to be witnesses of collapse, but also are called to be agents of recreation. And in that witnessing of the collapse, I guess that there's many things that we need to let go and to accept that are part of that collapse. But many of those are very hard to accept because we cling to them because they're noble, they're beautiful, and they're important causes that we are still trying to fight for, right? So how to acknowledge when to let go and just to be a witness of that collapse so you can focus your energy on being the agent of recreation. And if we can learn something from the myths to guide us.
Thank you. Thank you. Really good question that pulls threads right out of the story. So going back to time and eternity, the moments in stories are all eternal. The moments in dreams are all eternal. The moments that live inside a person, that make a person who they are, the living experiences that we cannot get rid of because they have become essentially part of us, they all can keep expanding and opening. So in the story, we have the old woman, often called the wise old woman, could also be called Sophia. And she sees the collapse of the beautiful garment of the world. Now, typically stories don't name emotions. It's the listeners who bring the emotions to the story. When you see a story that names the emotions, it's probably been tampered with. Traditional myths and stories give circumstances and dramatic things, and then the listeners are meeting the story. So like, if I'm telling the story of the old woman in the cave to say, whatever, hundreds of people, each person has to provide their own black dog. I've tested it. I'll ask people, so did everybody have a poodle? And someone says, no, I had a terrier. No, I had a wolfhound. No, I had a bulldog. Everybody had their own black dog. So that's the first thing in a way to understand that everything woven into the story has to be met from the listener by their own life. So everybody brings their own black dog. Everybody brings their own experience of the unraveling. So just to take where the question was coming from, we have these two sides, the unraveling and the reweaving. On the unraveling side, the story doesn't say, but when I tell it, I feel this tremendous sadness for just a moment. I'm telling the story, so I'm going to continue. But if someone said, what are you feeling right there? I feel this great sadness of, yes, we have to let go of all kinds of things. Some of them were earlier in our lives, the most meaningful things. In order to transform, which is one of the functions of the soul and one of the functions of story. When we take someone through a story or people through a story, the story is a transformation. Something happens that transforms the characters in the story. That's why it's so compelling. But our soul is here to transform. So there's part of us that responds to the transformation in the story. Transformation means to transit from one form to another. That's literally what it means, to move or transit from one form to another. That is to say, in order to get to the new form, the old form must die. It must not just collapse, but die. And we have to let it go. So one of the big energies that has to be dealt with at this time is grief and sorrow, which are the energies through which we let go. I mean, grief can overtake us. There are whatever stages of grief. I don't know how many they're counting these days, lots of stages of grief. But eventually you have to let go. The old saying is, too much grief makes a stone of the heart. That is to say, grief is about weeping and feeling and then letting it go. Otherwise, it becomes like a stone and we become like a stone. And so there's a whole psychological, emotional learning just on the side where the old woman is witnessing all of her work having collapsed. So I want to take it a little bit further. One of the ideas I really like and I work with is the notion that we're all initiates. We're initiates on a path. To be an initiate is, the word initiate means to take a step. So we have to be willing to take the next step. Part of taking the next step is letting go of what we had previously. To be in the middle of change is to not know where things are going. So part of the witnessing is not a passive thing. It's emotionally active. Witnessing the tragedy in the world makes me cry almost every morning. I mean, I'm stunned at the perversity and the meanness and the inhumaneness of what's happening in so many parts of the world. And I can't, my own sense is we can't separate ourselves from it. When we witness it, we're feeling it. So that means accepting stages of grief and feelings of loss. And that has to happen before we can move to the other side of the moment, which is finding our thread, getting inspired anew, and participating in the reweaving of the world. So we are in this big moment of that requires letting go, which cannot happen without emotional experience and without clarity of what we're letting go. In order to be effective as being part of those who are attempting to reweave and recreate the world. So the witnessing, I don't think, is abstract or lacking in feeling. And I'll go back to the dark night of the soul. In the dark night of the soul, the dark part, a person is letting go. I mean, and I would say specifically, usually in my experience, one of the things that is most essential to let go is the way we were wounded early in life. That everyone is wounded. Everyone is gifted and everyone is wounded, near as I can tell. The people who say they weren't wounded early in life are the most wounded people you can find. We're wounded not because we had bad parents and we were abused. That's the story for a lot of people. But for other people, there are just moments of indifference or moments when our mother had to take care of another child and we felt we needed that adoring, caring touch and love of mother. That's enough for the child to feel almost obliteration. And that feeling of abandonment, loss, rejection lives inside everyone. And the dark night of the soul is partly a getting in touch with that and feeling the agony and the grief of it in order to then let it go. And so I'm saying the witnessing is a very active, very important area. And it also includes not knowing, because between the moment that the old woman witnesses the collapse, but before she picks up the thread and starts weaving again, there's a period of not knowing. A lot of what we're experiencing in the world right now is not knowing. We don't know what's coming next. We don't know if next is coming. And the other term for that in-between period of not knowing is liminality, to be betwixt and between with no clear evidence of what happens next. And that's part of the courage of the moment, whether it's the moment of transformation individually and or collectively. I think we're all in a collective rite of passage, and we're now mostly in the liminal phase of it, the not knowing phase, the letting go phase, the trusting something we can't see phase. That's my perspective.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. I feel like I feel I'm gonna have to watch this again a few times before we meet next week with some of you and then in a month with the rest of you. It's been so packed. I'm just going to remind us that we have about maximum about half an hour left in case there are more questions or comments that you'd like to make. Anna, over to you.
Thank you, Isa. Thank you so much, Michael, for your beautiful insights. You mentioned before your tea ritual for writing down your dreams. And I would like to ask if you have any other ritual or practice for incubating dreams and connecting with the center of the cosmos.
No, good question. Thank you. And of course, incubation is a beautiful word that has to do with giving birth. And so, all right, my basic approach is that the dreams are coming from the mysterious center of the cosmos, and they're bringing something I wouldn't find otherwise. So that makes me not want to interfere with the process too much. In other words, on a psychological level, the dream is a potential connection to the deep self, and sometimes, maybe often, the ego is in the way. So, so I don't want to bring. What I will do, I will not try to get a dream, and I'm not a big fan of lucid dreaming as I have seen it used. But what I do is I try to pay attention to what's really troubling me. I try to get clear the questions that I am actually struggling with. And then I watch to see what the dream world does with it. So that's one part of that. And then another thing that's important to me is our dreaming will tend to use certain symbols repeatedly. In other words, dreams will pull us into a symbolic lexicon, a framework of ideas and images and symbols that are in some ways peculiar to us. Not that other people don't have them, but the way they're speaking is peculiar to us. So on one hand, I'm open to whatever comes, and then over time, because I've worked on dreams for so long, I notice, oh, here it comes again. You know, like 2 nights ago, I had a dream that I was in a convertible car. I've never driven a convertible car or owned one. It's not what I would normally choose, but here I am in a convertible car. And not only that, I'm speeding with the car, kind of getting excited by the speed and the sports car level quality. And I look back and there's like there's an infant in a car seat in the back. And I suddenly realized, oh, this is a dangerous way to drive with an infant in the back. And so I slow down and I pull over. And so, I mean, I could work on that dream for 2 days. First of all, the convertible, I've had dreams of a convertible before. I don't know that I would ever buy one, but I dream about them. And then, of course, it's not actually a car, and the key word is convertible. And cars and dreams often represent the ego, you know, because like the ego learns how to drive. The dreaming soul is not driving. We can go anywhere without a car. It doesn't matter in a dream. So it's really the ego that drives the car. And in this case, the dream seems to be reminding me that the car, the vehicle, is convertible. In other words, I have more options than I normally believe that I do. I don't have to follow the patterns that are most familiar to me. I actually have by now more of a convertible vessel that I could work with. That's the first part of it. And then the second part of it is I forgot that I had a newborn child in the vehicle. Now, I actually don't have a newborn child. I haven't been part of giving birth to a child for quite a long time. But the newborn child in a dream is the newborn project, the newborn episode, the newborn thing that's trying to come fully into life. and I happen to forget about it. And so then I'm turning, in the dream work, I'm turning to the child to try to remember and figure out what is it that's really new in my life, that's trying to be born, trying to become recognized, that needs to be nourished, and that has to, you know, come out of the back seat and have more of a role in the foreground. And so I forget what the question was, because now I'm just in the dream and I could just keep going with dreams. But I think it was something about how to work with them, or how, what else do I do besides writing them down. I'll add one more thing. Mysticism historically has almost disappeared in the Western world. Mysticism got replaced with logic and technology, kind of. But the thread of mysticism was preserved in two ways that I'm aware of. In what's called often the Romantic poets, Goethe and Rilke and many other poets, that were holding and keeping the thread of mysticism present. But the other way is through alchemy. Alchemy being misunderstood typically as actual chemistry trying to turn lead into gold. But the real essence of alchemy was trying to learn to live a symbolic life. And so the other thing I pay attention to is when there's an alchemical element in the dream. For instance, dreams about water, whether it's a puddle or a stream or a tidal wave, are in alchemy called solutio, which means it's about things that are going to change in a fluid, rapid way if we allow it to happen. Solutio gives us our word solution. In other words, if we can dissolve into the images in the dream, we can find the solution to the problem that we're carrying, kind of thing. So I use alchemy as a way to expand the elements in the dream. You know, after solutio, you have, if in alchemy, you have the element of fire comes in, calcinatio, and then the element of earth, which is when the thing comes together. They call it coagulatio. It's very charming language because it has the song of Romance languages in it. But it's another way to hold the dream and expand it using the symbolism itself. For instance, if there's a stairway in a dream, or an elevator in a dream, or a ladder in a dream, or a trail going up a mountain, that relates to what's called sublimatio. And what that's about is getting high enough to be able to look down and see our own psyche objectively, to see what's going on in the psyche. So I use those elements, symbolism in various ways, but alchemy as well, as tools to open the dream moments. You know, I'm sure if you work on dreams, you have that experience where you can work on the same dream for days because it is opening to another world, and the dream is like a screen through which all kinds of stuff tries to reach our consciousness.
And it will be very, very interesting to pay attention to not only what is trying to reach our consciousness in terms of our own individual psyche, but also the collective psyche we are a part of. That's also behind the reason why we've named Weaving Pluriverse Weaving Pluriverse. It's not just that we can weave the or a pluriverse, but the pluriverse weaves itself in a way, right? It's both. It's that in English it works very well. In Spanish it's a little bit harder.
And
We have
it weaves through us.
it weaves through
And-
us.
And when a group
Exactly.
of people work together, they actually dream for each other also. And you can begin to decipher when it's personal and specific and when it's for the group. And a person can get their awakening from someone else's dream under certain circumstances. And then you have the pluriverse, the woven world, and everything feels good for at least 24 hours.
Exactly. For the next 24 hours until the black dogs comes
Yes.
again. The black dog comes again. We have time, if I am feeling it correctly, we have time for about 2 to 3 more comments or questions if you all feel in the mood for this wonderful, wonderful weaving that we have the pleasure of doing today. So is there anyone else who would like to share your thoughts or your threads?
I have one comment here. This week that we were working on our lineage, I found myself feeling a little bit conflicted, because when I go back to research on my lineage, I find myself witnessing contradiction, conflict, violence, mainly because I was born into a class of privilege in a region with other classes and ethnicities that were oppressed through centuries. And when I think about the myths that you have mentioned today, most of them somehow or another are related to communities that have been oppressed, and also that are not part of my lineage. And I wonder, in your case, being yourself a white American, aware of all the violence and the exclusion of indigenous communities, have you found any type of conflict when researching and weaving into that knowledge? And what have you found on the other side? Like, what have they told you, and how have you dealt with that conflict, if you have ever encountered it?
Thank you very much. Meaningful question. Yes, I come from white privilege, although I come from a poor family. But especially in American culture, you could be a poor white person, you're still way more privileged than brown people and black people and anyone who is excluded, usually for superficial reasons. But several things happened to me that moved me out of the historical understanding of where I come from. And one of them was during the Vietnam War, when the United States made war on Vietnam and other countries for no good reason. I got drafted to go to the war, and I couldn't do it. I said, it's not a declared war, it's not a legal war, it's not a smart war. If you have another war, let me know. I'm not coming to this one. Long story, but what happened is I wound up in prison. In prison, it turns out that they even have more rules than they have in the outside world, and I don't do rules well, so I was a really bad prisoner. So I got put into solitary confinement. So I was in there for quite a while, for months on end. And talk about letting go, what happened over time is I was shedding. I couldn't see anybody. The only people I saw were guards who mistreated me. And I had to let go of everything that I had that I thought was me or mine. And I wasn't able to communicate with anyone. And so I was an orphan, and I was an outcast. Certainly in the prison, I was an outcast, and so on. And then I had this idea came to me to start fasting. They wanted to send me to a federal prison with the idea that I would be put in there and everybody would be told that I was a traitor, and then I would get killed in there. And that caused me to start fasting. And so I fasted for quite a while. And so now I was shedding a whole other level of life, the essential level of nutrition. and everything was being taken away, or I was pushing it away. And so now I'm 20 years old. I'm rapidly losing weight. I'm in a 10 by 12 concrete and metal cell for months on end. And then it turned out I wasn't alone. And I don't mean that I had actual visitors. I had mythical visitors, because I had learned about myth when I was young. And what came to me in this prison and isolation were characters from myth who were like in the cell with me and giving me like advice and encouragement. And I had a moment, or more than a moment, where I had to decide, or am I losing my mind, or am I finding my mind? And I decided I was finding my mind, or that my mind was finding me. And that my mind was the what would you call it? The lineage of my mind when past the historical tragedies and dangers, and connected to something ancient. And because my ancestry is Irish, I felt that part of what came present to me there was my Irish inheritance. And after I got out, and I was a devastated person, I went in weighing 150 pounds. I came out weighing 87 pounds. I couldn't explain to anybody what had happened. And I had almost died several times. I looked like I was dying still. But I happened to stumble upon the idea that in the traditions of Ireland, you fast against injustice. Without knowing what I was doing, I had enacted an ancient Irish custom or practice in which you fast against injustice in order to prove that something is really wrong. And in that process, I kind of found a lineage, if that makes sense. And it's not a lineage that is defined by history, but more defined by mystery. And it is part of me. I know it is part of me. And I was a different person from then on. Because in a sense, yes, I appear to be a white man, and therefore the one who receives all kinds of privilege. Yes, there's truth in that. But then there's another part of me that's Irish, and doesn't come from the roots of privilege, but comes from the roots of the earth, that comes from the roots of ancient storytellers and stuff. And maybe that's what also happened, because it was mythological figures that came to hang out with me. I realized that I was connected to that heritage, the lineage of story and storytellers. And it doesn't mean there aren't personal issues to deal with where it comes to privilege, because that's always the case, that's there. But it does mean there's deeper levels, and that when we really come together, when we're reweaving for more essential things than the historical occurrences and the accidents of privilege. So I hope that's helpful with that. But I came out of that cell as not simply a privileged white guy. I come out of there as someone who had been completely broken, or mostly broken, but not completely. And the things that were holding me together had nothing to do with privilege, or in a sense,
más en la noche. Yo
history.
todavía voy a hacer mi maleta.
There's a voice coming in from.
Yes, I don't know. There's
Sí,
a
¿no? Ya se quitaron.
participant who's unmuted. Wendy, can you mute your mic, please? Thank you. Sorry about that, Michael.
No, it's all right. Voices come in. I was talking
Yeah.
about voices coming
Yeah.
into the cell. Certainly, maybe they're, as part of them, they're coming back. So anyway, just maybe a kind of a summary idea. We are ourselves at a certain level ancient beings. We are the ancestors trying to come back in. We are the descendants of a great imagination. We are the inheritors of stories which bypass and even sometimes deconstruct the elements of history and especially privilege. The folk tales or folk myths, I'm calling them, survive all those civilization ideas and all those domination ideas. They're carried by the people. and by the folk. And the folk are those who are the children of the earth and the ones close to the earth, and therefore more able to touch the threads of imagination and genuine engagement. And so one of the things that's going on, I think, is the collapse of all the institutions that have been constructed to sustain the domination of privilege. I know they're fighting hard to hold on to it, but they're going to lose it because of the idea that the archetypes are shifting, that we're in the time of transformation. And so the transformation of the individual, at least partly, is a letting go of those things that we didn't choose, but that were impressed upon us because of either the privilege in our early life or the poverty in our early life. Both of them are damaging. And the idea is not to deny them, but to engage them and then figure out how to let that go, because deeper than that, below that, I don't care who the person is, everyone is a unique soul that came into this world to live a life of meaning. Each person comes in gifted. Each person's wounded as well, but we're here to give those gifts, heal those wounds. And when we're in that process, we're all human and none necessarily better than the other, all just threads of a living garment that's trying to embrace us as well as support us.
Thank you. This is such a gift. We have only 2 more questions, I see, and only time for that. So I'm going to hand it over to Lina, and then after that to Caro, and then we're going to wrap up. Over to you, Lina.
Hi, Michael. Thank you. I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on artificial intelligence and the way, what do you think about how to train ourselves to own our own images or to be sovereign in our own minds, to know how to put boundaries, to understand what to let in and what to let out in this world of image saturation, not only visual, but very stimulated, and also how to be in touch with what is true and what is, and know how to differentiate what is fake.
Yeah, big now developing problem, the fake AI being part of this capacity. Humans are so strange, you know. Humans always want to do stuff and they want to do everything. And just because something becomes possible, people think we have to do it. I love language. And so I noticed that AI, which is the new, really big, heavily supported engine of fakeness, declares itself to be artificial. It's artificial intelligence. And I know it can be used for some good things, but it's already pouring damaging images and ideas into people, and you think of young people especially. And so we're in that world, and I think of another AI, which I call authentic intelligence. And so part of our struggle now is to somehow be authentic in a world that is increasingly not just polarized, but kind of imbued with false images and false ideas and false flags and everything else. It is more important to be authentic, and it's more of a challenge to be authentic. And yet I think authenticity is the soul's response to falseness and fakeness. And so, yes, the world is going to be flooded now. AI is going to run its course because they can do it. And again, I'll say some of it might be useful, but in terms of what you were referring to, the images and the flood of ideas and images, it's a lot of false stuff. It's always been a challenge to be authentic, and that's why sometimes I use that idea of an initiation. The initiate is willing to not know and courageous enough to take another step, to trust that something meaningful can happen. And I think we are all cast as initiates now because the world we used to know is really already gone. And the world that's being offered is riddled with false ideas and false practices. And so we have to find ways to keep being authentic. So I'll just add this idea that there's no way to walk a meaningful path without having meaningful practices. And so we have to find practices that sustain our souls. And the two big paths of practice usually are contemplation, meditation on one path, and then the creative arts on the other. And even though I know AI is being used to already kind of break the meaning of art, most people are now seeing more AI generated images than actually artfully generated images. Our job is not necessarily to combat that, it's going to happen, but to keep finding practices that give us a sense of being genuine and authentic, that give us meditative ways to keep centering despite the distractions. And then also, we each are called to natural expressive arts. Some people to music, others to painting or sculpting or whatever that might be, but also some to writing and others to cooking food as an authentic way of nourishing, others to weaving literally and then weaving imaginally. We have to trust that we can keep expressing and being connected to our authentic self, but then have practices that help us to sustain those interconnections and give us ways to continually be able to bring something to the world around us, because slowly people are going to figure out that they're missing the authentic, and particularly young people. Young people need experiences of authentic other people, someone they can look at and say, wow, that took nerve, or that took courage, or that person has genius, or that person has a beauty in them. That has to be done, not just for ourselves, but also so that younger people can see something that can give them a reflection of what they are carrying inside. We have to live more authentically because the world has become less and less authentic itself.
Thank you, Michael. It's the perfect segue, and I'm going to ask for your indulgence, Caro, because it's 20 past, and I do need to wrap up and also tell you some things about what's coming. So can you be very precise? And Michael, can you give us maybe 5 minutes before the half hour? So can you both be sharp so we can wrap up in time?
Yes, thank you, Isa, and thank you for giving me the last question. Michael, you were talking about the young, and my question is related to these. Thank you so much. So much of the soul work, the mythic initiation that you speak of, it really comes to us as adults, right? After the culture has failed to midwife us into it. At least that was my case, as some kind of like remedy journey from many years of disconnection. So why do you think that our culture seems to discover that language of the soul and belonging when people are looking back instead of when they are first becoming themselves? And how might we reintroduce these initiatory processes earlier as part of education, community life, and the formation of the young?
Thank you. It's a big question, so I'll try to be concise. I think, go back to the story of the old woman in the cave. The unraveling is going to continue. Can't say how it's going to go exactly, but people are going to begin, not everyone, some people are going to begin to realize that what they thought the world was is no longer the case. And that's when you can either just shrink away from the world and try to hide, or you go looking for something that's meaningful and authentic. And so it's very hard to put authentic ideas and practices into systems that have been developed with the ideas of domination, privilege, and so on. It's really hard to do. So it's almost like most of the work I've done with young people has been with street kids, gang kids, and homeless kids, because they're outside the culture and they're closer to changing. And they're easier to give, it's easier to give them ideas, images, and stories because they don't feel like they're in the current mainstream story. So I don't know how we change the whole thing, and I'm not going to pretend to having any secrets about how to pull that off. But I do think this, that if enough people were awakening to who they already are inside, and I mean to their own genius nature and to their own authentic calling in life, then what happens is things start to change at a bottom level, at an earth level, and at a soul level. And then what happens is not that you have the vision of how to fix it, is you're doing your work. You're going along your path. You're doing your practices. You're being as authentic as you can be. And one day you come to a crossroads and something severe, challenging, important, dangerous, whatever it is happening. And not that you plan to be the person fixing it, it's just you find yourself there. And then you find that you have something to offer. You have some healing energy, you have some inspired energy, you have some creative energy, and that changes what's going on at that intersection. And if enough people are doing it, then the world changes, not because we all agreed to change it, but because we all agreed to try to become ourselves. And I'll just end with the old idea, change the soul, change the world.
Michael, you are such a gift to this world, and the preciousness of what you've just shared with us is sheer beauty, but most importantly, on behalf of all of us and everyone who is going to watch us, I would like to thank you for being such a wise elder and for being so in touch with your own soul in ways that are contagious and profoundly inspiring. This has been just beautifully synchronical also to everything that we are currently talking about and doing. It's almost as it's evident that that we are quite directly connected to the center of the cosmos as we weave Pluriverse. So thank you so much. May this be one of many encounters to weave together. May that be the case. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Really,
I'm going to
thank
borrow
you.
that phrase, contagion of the soul. Let us be struck by the contagion of the soul. Thank you.
Yes, beautiful. We shall send you, and for everyone who's watching, there's another very beautiful conversation we had last semester with Bayo Akomolafe. It's called The Cura Poiesis of the Soul, and it's directly about this. Very recommended. So I'm just nudging you all to go and watch that because it's another gem, just like what we just shared in this eternity that we are in now, in Kairos. And within that, I would like to take just this couple of minutes to invite you all to watch out to your WhatsApp because you will receive a few things, beautiful invitations to be more tentacular, the invitation to incubate your dreams now that we are, for some of you, about to meet with the forest, with the cloud forest spirit next week. For those of you who are coming later in the year, in a month's time, still it's going to be beautiful to start incubating dreams earlier on. So we are sending you the complete invitation to that in a moment on WhatsApp. I also want to remind you that this Friday we will have a collective wisdom weaving session on Zoom about spiders, about anything and everything we all know about spiders, because as we know, they are our mythopoetic inspiration for weaving Pluriverse, given that they are this incredible beings that have survived 5 mass extinctions, and in the timelessness of myth, in many cases have invented a language or invented the alphabet or are the weavers of what allows us to tell stories. They are like the meta myth weavers. So we are going to share all we all know about spiders this Friday. That's at 11 a.m. Bogota time, 9 a.m. Pacific time, or 6 p.m. European time. So don't miss that. We'll be there. And for those of you who are coming with us to meet the Cloud Forest next week, there is a logistics chat that is open that you can use for any questions you have on arriving, on sleeping on a tent, or on a refuge, or anything and everything you need to know. So that's it. Team, am I missing something critical that we should be sharing with everybody before we close?
No, Isa.
Okay, thank you. We've just dropped on the chat the link to the Curapoiesis of the Soul. Thank you, Lina. And in gratitude and ceremony, Michael, I conjure through my words that this may be one golden thread that allows us to continue weaving this world close to your wisdom. Thank you. Profoundly thank you. You've given us so many gifts today.
Thank you. All the best to everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Gracias.